According to the Orthodox Church of America website, they say that the return of the holy icons in the Council of Nicaea II for the Catholic Church are celebrated during the first Sunday of Lent. Each of the Sundays of Great Lent has its own special theme. The first Sunday is called the Feast of the Triumph of Orthodoxy. It is a historical feast commemorating the return of the icons to the churches in the year 843 after the heresy of iconoclasm was overcome. So there was one of the councils where they met to get rid of the icons, and then they had another council to bring them back. Because Catholics changed the Sabbath to Sunday and initiated other pagan practices such as Lent and Good Friday, we need to investigate these practices to see the whole picture of the Roman transformation of Christianity. Lent and Good Friday are disguised and offered as Catholic days of sacrament, but both are steeped in pagan worship. Protestant denominations stem from Catholic roots and remain Catholic children of Rome and Constantine. So, those of you who are not familiar with what Lent is, we're going to do a little brief education on it. So we're going to get this information from a Catholic source, which is catholiceducation.org. So let's see what they say Lent is. And you're probably wondering, where is this going with the Sabbath discussion? Well, you will find out as we unfold the information. So according to catholiceducation.org, they say Lent is a special time of prayer, penance, sacrifice, and good works in preparation of the celebration of Easter. So there is the connection. We've already discussed before about how Easter, in its pagan celebration of the sun, helps to give rise to the transformation of the Sabbath to Sunday, day of worship. Okay? So Lent is preparing the participant to prepare their lives for the celebration of the pagan holiday of Easter. So they say at this website, Lent is the special prayer of time of preparing yourself for Easter. Lent becomes more regularized after the legalization of Christianity in AD 313. So remember how we talked about earlier how that Constantine and the Catholic Church, actually not the Catholic Church, but Constantine legalized Christianity so that Roman citizens can feel free to participate in Christianity. But remember, during that time, Christianity is not operating in its pure form. It is quickly evolving from a pure state of Christianity into a mixed form of paganism. Lent is going to be involved with the worship of Tammuz. And we're going to find out here how Tammuz fits in with Lent and Easter and Catholicism and with the transformation of Saturday into Sunday. Lent becomes more regularized after the legalization of Christianity in AD 313. The Council of Nicaea in AD 325, in its disciplinary canons, noted that two provincial synods should be held each year, one before the 40 days of Lent. The word Lent itself is derived from the Anglo-Saxon word Lenten, which means spring. And so spring is linked to the Easter celebration of spring, where we're celebrating the pagan worship of fertility. And so Lententid, which literally means not only springtide, but also was the word for March, and that's centered around spring. So this is the month in which the majority of Lent falls in. From Catholic.org on their article Lent, they write, Ash Wednesday takes place 46 days before Easter Sunday and is chiefly observed by Catholics, although many other Christians observe it too. Ash Wednesday comes from the ancient Jewish tradition of penance and fasting. The practice includes the wearing of ashes on the head. The ashes symbolize the dust from which God made us. As the priest applies the ashes to a person's forehead, he speaks the words, "Remember, you are dust, and to the dust you shall return." So that comes from Catholic.org on the article Lent. So Lent, we're looking at Lent, we need to look at the pagan idea of Lent. And we get that from this book called The Two Babylons. And it is written by a man named Alexander Hislop. So he writes, to conciliate the pagans to nominal Christianity, Rome, pursuing its usual policy, took measures to get the Christian and pagan festivals amalgamated. Means they want to put them together. And by a complicated but skillful adjustment of the calendar, it was found no difficult matter. In general, to get paganism and Christianity no far sunk in idolatry, in this as in so many other things, to shake hands. So what he's saying is that in the early years of the church, they wanted to get paganism and Christianity to come together, and that's where we have this big mess in Christianity we have today, where a lot of Hebraic things seem foreign to us and we don't know about them because we haven't been taught them. And so he continues to write on. He says, among the pagans, this Lent seems to have been an indispensable preliminary to the great annual festival in commemoration of the death and resurrection of Tammuz. So we have to understand who Tammuz was. Tammuz was the resurrection of Nimrod, and both of them are the sun gods. And so Tammuz, when people are participating in Lent, it is you're worshiping Tammuz, the god. Let's see here. So Lent, according to newadvent.org, and this is a Catholic website, Lent is, during Lent, the bread must not be offered except on the Sabbath day and on the Lord's day only. And that's according to the Council of Laodicea, canon number 29. Let's look at what Lent really is. At Lent, a cross of ashes is placed on the forehead that represents not the cross of Jesus that they would have us to believe, but the cross on the forehead represents Tammuz. And so I was telling you earlier that the ashes of Tammuz are put on the forehead, and Lent is not about preparation for Ishtar as much as it is putting on our foreheads the mark of Tammuz. So the T that is put on our foreheads with ashes represents Tammuz. T, if you look at the T on the Eucharist, and the Eucharist is the small communion wafer that is used not only in Catholic Church, but in a lot of Protestant evangelical churches, they will use this Eucharist, and the Eucharist is this wafer that you take at communion, and it has a cross on it. Now, some would say, erroneously, oh, that means the cross of Jesus. Well, that's not what it really means. The cross on the Eucharist means Tammuz. The 40 days of Lent symbolizes the 40 years that Tammuz lived. Lent ends with Easter, which is where there's a tradition to eat ham, which is kind of ironic, because if we're eating ham at Easter, we are eating something that is unclean, and it is an unclean animal that people are eating at Easter when they're supposed to be remembering that Jesus died and resurrected from the dead. So they're eating an unclean animal that are used for abominations to celebrate a so-called holy event. So when they're eating the ham, they're actually symbolizing the remembrance of Tammuz, who was killed by a wild boar. And we get this information from RomanCatholicBeliefs.org. And so the Eucharist is held up when the priest holds it up while during communion. He's holding it up to honor Tammuz. At carm.org, in their article, What is Lent, they say our first reference to pre-Easter fasting comes to us almost by accident. It was in the midst of an early controversy over when Easter should be celebrated. Some churches believe that the day should remain tied to the Jewish Passover and fall on the same day on the Jewish lunar calendar each year, while others insisted that it should always fall on a Sunday in honor of the Lord's Day, the first day of the week. And so when they're keeping the 40 days of Lent as 40 days of mourning, they are mourning for the death of Tammuz, who was killed by a boar. So according to the Wikipedia article, The Eucharist, it says the Eucharist is also called the Holy Communion, or the Lord's Supper, among other names, is a Christian rite that is considered a sacrament in most churches, and as an ordinance in others. According to the New Testament, the rite was instituted by Jesus Christ during the Last Supper, giving his disciples bread and wine during a Passover meal. Jesus commanded his followers to do this in memory of me, while referring to the bread as my cup and the cup of wine as the new covenant in my blood. So the Eucharist, or communion, is based upon the Last Supper of Jesus and his disciples. Communion consists of bread and wine or grape juice, and it remembers the death of Jesus. Most churches will have a regularly scheduled time of taking communion in their services. But really the truth of the matter is, when we're taking communion, we're doing what it says in the scriptures. Remember, as often as we do this in remembrance of me. So what that really means is we're doing, every time we come together for Passover and we partake of unleavened bread, we are remembering the death of Jesus, that he gave his life for us. He died on the execution stake, or the cross, and he resurrected. That's what we're remembering when we do that at Passover. The idea correctly is that when we eat of the unleavened bread at Passover, we are fulfilling this scripture when he says, when you do this, remember, as often as you do this in remembrance of me, or what Jesus did for us on the cross. When you're using the Eucharist, you're using it that has been done with the idea of committing it to Tammuz, because when you have the cross on the wafer, the Eucharist wafer, it represents Tammuz. And so we are warned about Tammuz in the Old Testament, where it says in Ezekiel 8:14, "Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz." So let's revisit again, who was Tammuz? Tammuz was one of the three gods that made up the pagan trinity that included Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. So let's identify who these three people were. Nimrod was the sun god, and so Nimrod is mentioned in the Old Testament, and he was described as a great hunter before the Lord. And so Nimrod is this guy mentioned in the Old Testament that we find, And he's usually connected with the Tower of Babel, even though it doesn't say that he was at the Tower of Babel. But he was a person in the book of Genesis who was married to Semiramis. And so Semiramis is also known as Ishtar, and that's where we get the word Easter from. And she is the wife of Nimrod, and she is also the mother of Tammuz, and Semiramis is also referred to as the Queen of Heaven. So when Nimrod dies, he is reincarnated and comes back as his son Tammuz. So Tammuz is also, he's Nimrod as the husband of Semiramis, but he's also the son of Nimrod and Semiramis, so he's both the father and son. It's kind of a sick relationship. So Tammuz is a reincarnation form of Nimrod. So looking at Tammuz in who he was, Tammuz is the name of a Phoenician deity, the Adonis of the Greeks. He was originally a Sumerian or Babylonian sun god called Dumuzi. He's also called Dumuzi, and he is the husband of Ishtar, otherwise known as Semiramis. The worship of these deities was introduced into Syria in very early times under the designation of Tammuz and Astarte, and appears among the Greeks in the myth of Adonis and Aphrodite. So Adonis is Tammuz and Aphrodite is Semiramis, who are identified with Osiris and Isis of the Egyptian pantheon, showing how widespread the cult became. So it's this understanding we have. If we study out all the gods and religions of the world, we find out that all the gods in the world, they all point to being Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. They just have different names and different legends. In the International Standard Bible entry done by Dr. James Orr, he writes, the Babylonian myth represents Dumuzi or Tammuz as a beautiful shepherd slain by a wild boar, the symbol of winter. Ishtar long mourned for him and descended into the underworld to deliver him from the embrace of death. This mourning for Tammuz was celebrated in Babylonia by women on the second day of the 4th month, which thus acquired the name of Tammuz. So yes, there is a Hebrew month named Tammuz, that's where it gets its name from. According to althea.concernex.com, they write, Tammuz was born during the winter solstice on December 25th. So here we have another allusion to the pagan birthday of Tammuz. Tammuz was born during the winter solstice, December 25th. His birthday was celebrated throughout Babylonia and surrounding areas. Tammuz died in his 40th year. That's why they have 40 days of fasting during Lent. Tammuz died in his 40th year while boar hunting in the spring. In honor of him, the people mourned his death each spring for 40 days, one day for each of his life. After the 40th day fast, a joyful feast of Ishtar or Easter took place. At this feast, colored eggs were exchanged and eaten as a symbol of the death and resurrection of Tammuz in the spring crops. A feast of ham, symbolizing victory over the boar that killed Tammuz, was enjoyed by all. Finally, cakes marked with the letter T to remind everyone of Tammuz were baked and eaten, and that's where we get the tradition of hot cross buns. So with this worship of Tammuz, we get several things. We get the birthday of Tammuz on Christmas, December 25th. Okay? And then we have a celebration of Lent for 40 days to celebrate how many years that Tammuz lived. So he got killed in the springtime, and to celebrate Tammuz, because he was killed by a wild boar, we have this tradition of feasting on ham. And we also, another tradition is to make hot cross buns with a cross on it to represent Tammuz. So we have all these elements of the worship of Tammuz that the traditions of man have invaded Christianity and have helped to turn our eyes against the Bible. GotQuestions.org tells us that the later observance of the Tammuz rituals was somewhat unique in that they were performed primarily by women, and while worship may have included celebration of Tammuz's return, the mourning of his death was emphasized more. The women's tears recalled the supposed tears of Ishtar that brought Tammuz back. This is what the women in the gate of the temple were doing in Ezekiel chapter 8. So Easter is also about the resurrection of Tammuz. Christmas celebrates the birth of Tammuz. Eating ham celebrates the death of Tammuz by a boar. Easter eggs celebrate the resurrection of Tammuz. So all these things contribute to the church being deceived and being brought into paganism. So now we look at the commanded days that God has given us in the Sabbath day. So here are some thoughts to think of. When did God change his commandment? And when did the Sabbath cease to be holy? So here's something to think about. God spoke the Sabbath into a commandment. Wouldn't the same spoken commandment apply to abolishing the commandment? In Malachi 3:6, it says that God does not change. So there's this idea that the Sabbath keeping is done and done away with, and it's in the past. But I'm here to tell you that there are some scriptures that say that we will be keeping it in the future. So Sabbath keeping is in the past, it's in the present, and it's also in the future. Sabbath keeping has not gone away. In Isaiah 66:23, it says, "And it shall come to pass that when from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, says Yahweh." And in Matthew 24:20, it says, "But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day." So both of these scriptures are prophetic in what they're writing about. They're talking about a time that is still yet to come that we will be keeping the Sabbath day. So in Matthew 24:20, if we read it in context, this scripture is talking about the abomination of desolation. So it's talking about when the abomination of desolation happens, that it's going to be a great time of tribulation. And we're supposed to pray that when we are called to leave, and we are called to retreat, and we're called to get out when this happens, that we better hope and pray that it's not on the Sabbath day. So if the Sabbath day has been done away with, then why is Jesus himself talking about pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day? This is proof right here that Sabbath keeping will still exist in the future. So there is this thing about man commanding Sunday and it being a Sunday law, okay? So Constantine decrees in 321 AD the Sunday law, where it says, "On the venerable day of the sun, let the magistrates and people residing in cities rest, and let all the workshops be closed in the country. However, persons engaged in agriculture may freely and lawfully continue their pursuits. because it often happens that another day is not so suitable for grain sowing or for vine planting, lest by neglecting the proper moment for such operations, the bounty of heaven should be lost. This edict of Constantine declaring the Sabbath changed to Sunday, he is declaring a pagan day, which is Sunday, to replace God's holy day of the Sabbath. At the Council of Laodicea, they established 60 canons of church law, canon laws that were set up as ordinances and regulations that were made by church authority. One of these canons was the outlawing of keeping the Sabbath day, which is Saturday, and encouraging rest on a new Sabbath day, which is Sunday. That is Canon 29 of the Council of Laodicea. It says, Christians shall not Judaize and be idle on the Saturday, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day they shall specially honor. So they are calling Sunday as the Lord's day, and they say we should be working on the Sabbath day in this canon law. And this canon law was established in 364 AD, canon number 29. So they in this canon law, there's the transference from Sabbath to what they call the Lord's Day, being Sunday. In Exodus 31:16 through 17, God's law, which opposes man's Sunday law, says, wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual sign. For a perpetual covenant, sorry. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. So we have a Hebrew word here for sign. It says sign. That means oath, and that means a signal or a mark. The Sabbath is the one element of Hebrew roots that distinguishes us from the other sects of Christianity. And in understanding what Sunday really is, we have this thing that is called the beast system. I'm sure a lot of us have heard of the mark of the beast that is to come. In Revelation 13:17, it says, and that no man might buy or sell, except he that he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. In Daniel 7:23, it says, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it into pieces. The beast or the beast system could be the Sunday law requiring everyone to worship the beast on Sunday. Sunday very well could be the mark of the beast. The fourth and last beast of Nebuchadnezzar's dream is believed to be Rome. The Catholic Church, who changed the Sabbath to Sunday, is of Rome. Catholic Catechism number 2174 says, Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week. Because it is the first day, the day of Christ's resurrection recalls the first creation. Because it is the eighth day following the Sabbath, it symbolizes the new creation ushered in by Christ's resurrection. For Christians, it has become the first of all days, the first of all feasts, the Lord's Day. And it says regarding Sunday, we all gather on the day of the sun, for it is the first day after the Jewish Sabbath, but also the first day when God, separating matter from darkness, made the world. And on this same day, Jesus Christ, our Savior, rose from the dead. And so this comes from the Vatican archives. And so what they're actually saying in here is they're actually creating an extra day. They're saying that it's the eighth day after the seventh day when God rested, instead of understanding the truth that after the Sabbath, the week starts all over again with the first day. There's only 7 days of the week, but Catholic Catechism has added an 8th day to it. In the Catholic Catechism in the Vatican Archives, it says in number 2175, Sunday is expressly distinguished from the Sabbath, which it follows chronologically every week. For Christians, its ceremonial observance replaces that of the Sabbath in Christ's Passover. Sunday fulfills the spiritual truth of the Jewish Sabbath and announces man's eternal rest in God. For worship under the law prepared for the mystery of Christ, and what was done there prefigured some aspects of Christ. Those who lived according to the old order of things have come to a new hope, no longer keeping the Sabbath, but the Lord's day, in which our life is blessed by Him and His death. So out of this Vatican document, they are overriding God's law of the Sabbath day. They're establishing Sunday as the Lord's day and saying that there is an old way of Sabbath keeping, and that those who keep the Sabbath are living under an old order of things, and that we are no longer having to keep the Sabbath day, but that now that there's a new day, there's a Lord's day that the Catholic Church has established in keeping of Sunday.